Okay, so on the other parts of the video, I've talked about the cryptography puzzles and how they're used to decrypt portions of a diary that students are unlocking. And so that side sort of allows students to practice their cryptography skills. But the other half is in the diary. And in this diary, our goal is to try and teach students about basic security concepts. And the best way to learn these kinds of concepts is when you have it in a meaningful context. Typically, if you have a goal that you're trying to strive for, or if you have some sort of emotional involvement in what's going on, you'll tend to retain that information better. And so that was what was the motivation behind creating a CTF around Divergent. So Divergent is a series that a lot of the high schoolers know about. They know the characters, they know the clans, they know the basic plot of the book, and so the book series itself has a cybersecurity subplot that's explicitly mentioned in the short stories that were released after the trilogy, and so we borrow that in terms of using it in our curriculum. So to get at the diary, if you're an instructor, on the main page there's a zip file which you'll download, and then when you open it up, you see this directory, the crypto instructor material. There are three directories here. There are the CTF challenges, the lecture handouts, and the urban race. So the lecture handouts, I'm not going to cover in this video. These are sort of the content that goes along with teaching the basic concepts that allow the students to then do the homework problems, which are the CTF challenges and the diary entries. What we're interested in are the CTF challenges and the diary entries, and then when you go through this, you are preparing the students to then do the urban race, which is the culmination of the plot. So as they read this diary, they see the plot developing, and at the end of the CTF, you're at a point where you're left hanging in the story, and the sort of the resolution of the plot happens in the urban race, which I won't cover here. But what I want to do is I want to talk about the plot as it weaves into our security concepts. So if you go into the CTF challenges directory, you'll see that the challenges are here, both numbered and not numbered, and so these are the challenges that are in each of the 24 videos that are on the other videos in this playlist. And then you have the full diary and the intro letter to kick the whole plot off. So what I'll do is I'll start with the intro letter. And this intro letter sets up the plot. So you can read this. Dear fellow initiates, I need your help. My friend 4 has gone missing. He was working on a computer project. He wouldn't tell me what it was. And then there have been rumors that Janine, the erudite leader, was on the verge of a breakthrough in the development of the new simulation serum. And so this matches the plot of Divergent. Can you help me find out what happened to him? So immediately you're starting with the mystery of trying to figure out what happened to 4. He kept an electronic diary of what he was working on. He was afraid that it might fall into the wrong hands, so he password protected it using cryptography that he learned in Dauntless control room training, which is also true to the plot. And he said that only people with special abilities could decode what the passwords were, and so this is these people with special abilities are potentially the campers. And so what she's found is in his apartment there are some papers, which are the cryptography puzzles that are clipped out, the 24 puzzles. And a USB key. And in the USB key are the individual PDF files for each of the diary entries. And that's what they are. And so Triss has heard that the students who get this letter have received cryptography training that is similar to what 4 had. And so she gives them the USB key and the password-protected diary in order for them to decode these diary entries in order to find out what 4 was working on for each of the days leading up to his disappearance. at each of the diary entries, we'll, in order to message back to Tris that what the diary entry contains, students are asked to submit the answers to these diary entry challenges to this website. And this is how we sort of keep track of whether or not campers, students have finished each of the individual entries. If you offered this and you didn't want to use this website, you could just have them just fill in the diary entries and print them out with the answers to them. Okay, and so yeah, we have an automated system, which is why there's a login system if you go to this website, which you don't necessarily need if you're offering this curriculum. Okay, and then finally, PS4 had a knack for solving anagrams, and one of his favorite things to do in the control room was to speed solve jumble puzzles. And this will come in, this is a forward hint to the last of the 24 challenges, which is basically a jumble that students need to solve to unlock the final PDF entry. So now what we're going to do is we're going to open up each of the diary entries. So the password to protect each of the individual ones we talked about decoding in the previous video series. So now we're going to go and open up the diary entry, and as part of the instructor material, I have the full diary as one PDF file for us to go through. So that we're not individually unlocking each of these entries. It'd be a pain. So in the instructor material, if you double-click the full diary, I did password protect this just in case students came across this and wanted to decode it themselves without actually solving any of the cryptography puzzles. So the password is CyberPDX in lowercase. And then you'll see here there are 24 pages, and each one is corresponding to a single day in the diary. And so they'll get these as 24 different files that are each password protected. And so what I'm going to do in this video is go through each one of these one by one and then sort of go through the answer and what we're looking for in each. So the first diary entry sets up the plot. And as you read through here, you can see that 4 is trying to figure out what's going on with the erudite. And he's trying to keep a diary so that if something happens to him, that there might be a record to let other people know what he was getting into. And so he wanted to password protect it, and so this is the setup for the way the diary works. And so one of the things that he's found is he has control over all the cameras that are in the Dauntless control room. And he knows that the leader of the Dauntless clan, Max, seems to be acting suspiciously. And so what he's doing is monitoring his activity using the control room video cameras, surveillance cameras that are all around. And so the answer, the puzzle inside of this entry asks, well, what kind of attack have I been launching on Max? And so when you have a camera pointed over the shoulder of Max as he's using his computer, this is known as shoulder surfing in security. And so this sort of ties in with, for example, recently it's been sort of leaked that the reason why they're able to attribute certain attacks, for example, the State Department attacks in 2014, the reason they were able to so tightly attribute that to Russia was that they were able to hack into the surveillance cameras around the person who was hacking them in real time and then show the person on their computer launching these attacks against the State Department. So, okay, so let's go to the second day. I get the second day's entry here. So in the second day, he's able to figure out Max's password, which is this 084628. Pretty strong password, I guess. And so it's one thing knowing the password of someone, but it's another thing to actually get at the system to do something. And so typically, once you have some form of access to a computer, you'll ultimately want to install a backdoor. And a backdoor allows you to get persistent access to that computer just in case, for example, Max changes his password. So it's a matter of installing sort of stealth, I guess you could consider it malware on the back end. And so he talks about getting into the system and trying to install a tool. And so he's heard about a piece of software that they use, and it was once called, and so this is being used in the past tense because the Divergent series is in this post-apocalyptic sort of world, so all of our current systems that we know today are blown away. And so he heard of a software tool that they once called the Swiss Army knife of TCP/IP, and it's often used to implement remote backdoors on systems. And so this right here, if students will search, they can start to find out about these tools, and they'll eventually come across a tool called Netcat, which is an industry standard tool, and it can be used for many things, but one of the things that it can be used for is to initiate a backdoor connection or to install a backdoor connection. And so, and this sort of ties into how we're trying to teach them the concept and the name of the tool in the context of a plot that they want to follow to completion. Okay, so that second diary entry answer is Netcat. The third day, getting a backdoor on Max's computer is one thing, but he needs to be able to copy the contents from the computer periodically. And so one of the things that people do to prevent sensitive data from leaving their networks is to monitor their network and to detect signs of what they call data exfiltration. So for example, and this has been done poorly for sure, but for example, if you're a vendor, or maybe you're a corporation, and all of a sudden you see loads and loads, terabytes of data leaving your network, well, unless you know exactly what the source of that transfer is, you might be experiencing a malicious actor basically exfiltrating all of the data from that corporation. And so they talk about a tool, a lightweight open source intrusion detection tool, that might be able to prevent data exfiltration. And so here, Four is worried that on Max's computer, there is something that's trying to detect for this, and he'll need a way to bypass this tool. And so he's describing a tool that whenever it sees an anomalous connection that matches one of its rules, it alerts the network administrator, and so he's trying to figure out a way to bypass this. Now, this is, if you understand the crypto key that was used to unlock this PDF entry, the key that was used is the pig says. And so this is sort of a forward hint to what the answer to this diary entry is. But if you do a Google search on these intrusion detection and prevention systems, one of the things, and specifically an open source one, there are very few of them that are out there. There's maybe Bro, and then this tool, which is Snort, which is an industry standard tool that you can configure to try and monitor your network. Okay, so that's the answer to the third one. Okay. So the fourth entry talks about how he believes that the Dauntless systems are protected by deep packet inspection. And so this is something where these systems will sort of inspect all the data that's going across the network in order to detect things like data exfiltration. And so he talks about a toolkit that combines encryption with steganography that makes exfiltration pretty impossible to detect. And so in the plot, he talks about how the Erudite had banned this technology, and then Four is forced to dig through the underground forums to figure out what this, figure out whether or not a tool exists that will allow him to exfiltrate this data. And of course, there is an open source tool that got released in March 2016, and so that does data exfiltration. And when you Google this, you see that there's this company called SensePost, which released the data exfiltration toolkit, and so the answer to this is SensePost. And you can see at the very end, he talks about tomorrow being visiting day, and so in the plot, he's going to try and install the backdoor and the data exfiltration toolkit on Max's computer after logging in using his password, so that he can then start monitoring and exfiltrating the data from Max's computer, which will lead us to the fifth day. So in the fifth day, Ford describes how he managed to install the software on Max's computer, and then he's got this trove of data that's coming to him, but he wants to be careful in terms of making sure that people don't notice that he's spending all of this time on the computer systems in the control room. And so he talks about trying to poison, he talks about an attack where hackers poison reputation systems by forging multiple identities to hide the fact that all of the access is coming from a single source. And so he is going to now forge some identities to try and create some cover for his activities to do the investigation. And so there is an attack, and the term that's used for this was coined in a book about a woman suffering from a dissociative identity disorder, and the cryptographic the key to unlock this particular diary entry is Shirley's identities. And so the book that this refers to is a book called Sybil, which was about a woman with multiple personalities, and it's based on a woman called Shirley Mason, which is something that if the students can search for, they'll find the reference to Sybil's, which is this the answer to this particular diary entry. So that's what Ford is going to do. He's going to try and create Sybil's to confuse anyone who can then come back and try and analyze his actions. Okay, so for day 6, it's one thing to create fake accounts on particular systems so that you hide the fact that your data is coming from a particular account, or the activity is coming from a particular account. But it's another thing to hide your network identity. So if you have 100 people coming from the exact same network address, you might think that actually is one person. And so to get around this, Ford is attempting to go further in covering his tracks in terms of trying to analyze the activity on the network. And so he talks about something called an anonymizing network. And so if you want to hide your activity, there is industry standard sort of approaches for doing so. And so anonymizing networks and crowds of proxies are exactly the same, or not exactly, but they're similar to Sybil attacks in which your network traffic is bounced across all sorts of other nodes so that the receiver of that traffic can't de-identify you or specifically identify the source of the traffic. Okay, and so in this entry he talks about doing some research on anonymizing networks, and what we ask the campers to do is to look for all the different ones and see which one matches this word. And so this one is sort of easy. The most popular one is called Tor, and this links back to, again, the password entry to unlock this is onion route. So Tor is the onion router in this case. And so we're trying to teach them the idea of hiding your identity using an anonymizing network. Okay, so while the previous 2 diary entries talk about hiding the source of where the access is coming from, you also want to hide your presence on the target machine that you've infiltrated. And so this diary entry talks about a stealthy type of malware that Ford wants to install on Max's computer to sort of hide the files and the programs that he's running on Max's computer from analysis. So if Max suspects there's something going on with this machine, he might use a bunch of diagnostic tools to try and figure out, well, what is running on here that shouldn't be running, sort of like what an antivirus would try and do. And so he just describes a software to sort of hide from it. And one of the sort of cases in, I guess, popular literature where this has happened, or in popular history, is with Kevin Mitnick. So Kevin Mitnick was a hacker who, as soon as he logged into a system, he would hide his track by editing all the log files and making sure that they didn't expose his presence. And he was eventually detected by the administrator, who was emailing the log files periodically back to a different account basically sending the log files off machine and then comparing them over time. And so Mitnick was detected by Shimomura by this shrinkage of a login file, a log file. And so that's what a piece of software called a rootkit will do in place. And so when students look for stealthy software that hides processes, programs, and files, hopefully they'll get the rootkit as being one of the top entries coming back. So on day 8, we find 4 rocking and rolling with all of his tools that he has deployed to try and help him get through Max's computer. And I should say the overall goal of this activity is to sort of get students in the mind of a penetration tester to see all the different ways that this person can use their creativity to try and reach a specific goal. And so that it gives them a good sample of the kinds of things that they might be exposed to in a technical career based on cybersecurity. So in day 8, he's got all of his stuff running, and he's able to start digging through Max's computer. And he goes through there, and he sees a file called serum, and it's got this suffix .aes. And so when he opens this file, it's random data. And this is what you would get if you encrypt a file. You would get a high entropy random data from this file. And so the key letters here are AES, and AES is the Advanced Encryption Standard, which is an industry-wide standard for encrypting data. And so he talks about how AES actually has modes which are insecure and should not be used at all. And so if you're using cryptography, you really need to know what the algorithm underneath is doing. Otherwise, it can look secure, but it can definitely not be secure. And that's one of the things that we'll see when we're decrypting the cryptography puzzles, is that, yeah, that looks random and it looks secure, but there's ways of reverse engineering the encoding or the encryption scheme for any of these. And so in this case, the students are trying to discover a mode that is known insecure. And so in the description, we talk about ways that you can take block ciphers and get them to resist attacks against them by chaining the output of one block to the input of the next block. And typically this is what you would like to have happen. Otherwise, if you have a specific keyword that shows up in multiple places in your document, if you don't chain the encryption with each other, you'll find that the exact same ciphertext will appear in multiple places. And this is a flaw in what they call ECB mode. So the idea here is that students will research this. They don't have to understand how the attack works. All they have to do is understand that, yes, there are certain modes of this industry standard encryption algorithm that you don't want to use if you want certain guarantees of security. Okay, so that's ECB mode. Okay. And so in day 9, he finds that in looking at the encrypted blocks, he sees that there are several repeating ciphertexts. And so obviously this was using an insecure mode, but even if you know that it's using ECB mode, it still takes quite a while to break the actual algorithm. And so he's in a rush. So 4 is in a rush, and so he's hoping to get a shortcut. And one of the things that you'll see happening in today's world is that, hey, I don't really want to spend the time to break the cryptography. Maybe I can try and break the person who used the cryptography and then just completely avoid that. And so this is the kind of thing that's happening when adversaries are sending phishing attacks to get passwords for targeted people, rather than trying to break the protocol or the encryption of the thing that person is using. And so one of the ways you can do this is that, so humans typically create these encryption keys and these passwords that are being used to unlock encryption keys. And so maybe a shortcut is to try and see if Max has configured the key using an easily guessed password. And so if you have used a very simple password, it's vulnerable to an attack, and it's known as the dictionary attack, which is what the answer is here. And this ties into the key that unlocks this particular diary entry, which is Merriam's intrusion. So Merriam-Webster is a branded dictionary, and then an intrusion is an attack. And so hopefully by reading this, the students can understand that yes, a dictionary attack against weak passwords is often very successful in exposing account information. And so in day 10, 4 reports that Max's password that he used was brownies, which is an inside joke because the Dauntless they're famous for their brownies. And so he's able to decrypt his this file, which is plans for this serum that is a mind control serum, if you remember the plot. And one of the things he does, does then is he knows that because this file was important, it got encrypted. And so one of the things that happens is that if you selectively encrypt certain files, well then if an adversary gets on there and sees that, then the adversary knows that all the important files are the ones that are encrypted, and then he or she can ignore all the plaintext ones and go straight to the family jewels, I guess is what you would call it. And so that's what he does, and he decrypts a bunch of files, and he sees that the modification date on some of these files is relatively recent. You get into the file system, and you see when these files are created. You can see the activity that's going on, and he realizes that the plans are imminent to launch this serum. And so now time is of the essence, and this motivates him to want to try and monitor the activity going into Max's computer in real time, rather than sort of pulling that information to try and monitor it actively. And so he thinks about and he talks about installing a monitor that's basically an open source network packet and protocol analyzer that he can place on the network to read all the live data being sent over it. And so he wants to install this on Max's computer so that he can capture the plans as they are making them. And so in this case, the students are supposed to go and look out and see the tool that can be used to monitor all the traffic going across a specific network, and this is of course going to be Wireshark. And again, this links back to the hint that the key that unlocks this entry as well, which I think is like Great White Cable or something like that. All right. Okay, so day 11 sees 4's handiwork completely torn down. So it looks like they somehow discovered all of the software that 4 put on it, and then the computer got carted away. So and now 4 is really worried about being traced as being the person who installed all of that stuff, and so he's trying to figure out how the heck he got detected. And so perhaps he perhaps he used a program that looked authentic but was actually fake. And so if Max had installed this kind of this kind of piece of software on his system and 4 actually executed it, then rather than executing the actual command, it executed something that exposed him. And so this kind of fake program that looks legitimate but is actually doing something else is called a Trojan. So same with the Trojan horse. And that's what students are supposed to go and find out. So day 12 furthers the plot, and 4 realizes that the Erudite have boxed up Max's computer, taken it away, and instead given him something new. And this something new is a computer that basically looks like a Linux OS with almost all of the applications stripped out of it. So in security, we talk about the surface area of attack. And so when you strip out all of the applications and leave behind a single application, you reduce your surface area. And in this case, it's just a web browser that he's been given. And so Ford is digging around for information about this system because he's going to try and subvert it as well, because he has to figure out what the plans are with Max. And so in doing so, he sees that this particular system blocks arbitrary applications from being installed and executed. So it eliminates his previous avenue of attack. It uses auto updates to update itself periodically so that security vulnerabilities are always being patched quickly. It uses sandboxed execution so that if someone compromises the browser, they don't get the whole system. And then it uses what's known as trusted hardware to make sure that only software that's been blessed by the vendor runs. And these are all modern techniques to locking down computing systems that we're hoping to get into systems that everyone uses. And so sort of introducing these concepts in the context of Ford trying to figure out what's running on these systems. And of course, the operating system that is running all of this stuff is Chrome, which is the answer here. So if they do enough digging, there are very few operating systems that have all of this, and Chrome is one of them. So that's day 12. So day 13, Max's new computer has finds out that it's been set to prevent him from saving sensitive information locally, and he is now forced to log into a remote erudite system to do all of his work. And so because Max is more paranoid now, he's now hiding his password as he's typing it in. So sort of like, that's good advice for anybody, to always hide your password, hide the typing as you punch things in, whether it's the keyboard or the ATM machine. And so in order to get this Max's password, because Ford is going to need it to log into the erudite systems to get all the information on that system, he talks about trying to lure Max into entering his credentials in a site that Ford controls. And so the technique that many adversaries will use is to pose as a trustworthy entity in an electronic communication to try and trick a user into sending them these credentials. And so these are attacks known as phishing attacks, where you pretend to be the IT department, or you can pop up a website that looks like a legitimate website and then trick a user into entering the credentials into either the website or in an email, and these sorts of things. And this is a highly popular mode of attack for adversaries. And in fact, I think this is the one that got, for the Russian election dump, this is how they were able to get some of that information. So day 14 sees Ford describe the results of his phishing attack on Max. And so what he does is he sends Max an email with a link to a web server that Ford temporarily brings up on a control room computer to see if he can capture Max's credentials. And then he uses the video cameras in the video cameras in Max's office to try and monitor Max as he's entering his credentials into the website. And he's viewing Max as he's trying to, and he sees that Max actually does click these email messages, and it brings up Windows, and you see Max pause and continually try and click the message again, waiting for the log, and then launching the login page, but making no attempt to log in. And so what is described here is Max bringing up this fake site and not knowing what to do. And so one of the things that happens is that if you use a password manager, such as a tool like what is the answer to this diary entry, the password manager will record your password on the site so that you don't have to remember it, and will automatically fill in the login page with the credentials. And so clearly what I'm trying to describe here is what happens when you are redirected to a site that you don't have any credentials for. Well, it doesn't fill those in automatically, and then even though you're expecting it to and it doesn't happen, you sort of have a sign. There's a clear sign that there's something wrong, and this is the sign that Max is seeing. He doesn't see his password credentials being filled in automatically. And so this sort of exposes the benefit of using a password manager in that this phishing attack doesn't work. And so I want students to read this and sort of do a search on different password management software that's out there. And so at the end of this, Four realizes that Max probably doesn't even know his password to the Erudite system. He has sort of allowed the LastPass tool to remember it for him to automatically log in. And that's what the answer to this entry is. And here you can see that the letters L and S are in red in this fill-in-the-blank puzzle. And the reason why this is for the last jumble puzzle to unlock the final diary entry. It's a jumble made up of these characters, so I can ensure that students have completed the first 24 levels in order to get to the last diary entry. Okay, so figuring out how to pull passwords out of a password manager is going to be difficult unless you're someone like Tavis Ormandy. But if you can't rely on getting Max's password out of the password manager, then maybe there's some other way you can figure out how to subvert his. And so in day 15, Four is considering a way of attacking Max by using what he describes as invisible web page elements called iframes that are overlaid on top of a web page that a user is viewing. And these frames are transparent so that the user doesn't see them, but because they're overlaid on top, when the user clicks on these things, it basically directs that click to a malicious site. And when you leverage what's known as a cross-site scripting attack, that could reveal some information about the user if you're not careful. And so this attack is called a redress attack. And so in order to decode this particular message, students will have to do some research on this. And when they do a search on this, the attack is called clickjacking. So click hijacking is the answer to this one. And of course, clickjacking is sort of disabled with plugins such as NoScript, which try and automatically shut down malicious JavaScript files. So JavaScript is the execution engine for your browser, and so it's the part of the browser that actually runs code. And so it runs code from, for example, unknown entities. So NoScript realizes that this is a danger and tries to automatically stop the running of certain scripts. Okay, so in this case, it managed to detect this iframe and pops up a warning for Max. And so in this case, because this avenue of attack is dead, Four then considers another avenue of attack, and in this entry he talks about what's known as HTTP cookies. And so in order for the client browser and the server to sort of have a lasting session, you have to have some shared state between them that identifies the client to the server. And this thing is called a cookie. And one of the problems with cookies is that if you send this cookie over a public network without being encrypted, anybody who sees this cookie can capture it and replay it as their own and hijack your identity. And so that is what this particular entry is describing. And so Four is thinking that maybe he can launch something on that network to try and find out one of Max's cookies, and in particular the cookie that he is using to eventually log into the Erudite system. So when he logs into the Erudite system, he uses his username and password, and then after that, the server and the client negotiate a cookie, and that is the piece of information that is used from then on between Max and the Erudite server, so that he doesn't have to keep on typing his username and password all the time. And so this is a credential that from then on is used to validate Max to the server. Now you definitely want this to be encrypted when you send it, and so before we had unencrypted HTTP everywhere, there was an attack that allowed someone sitting in a coffee shop on an open wireless network to hijack all of the identities of the social media that people were using. So if any of these social media sites were using unencrypted HTTP to log as people were using this site. So on the login, you typically use a secure HTTP, but then a lot of sites up until recently were using clear text HTTP to communicate. And this is where if you see the cookie in the clear, you can hijack that session. And then, so there's a tool that did this automatically. And so Ford describes this tool, and then this was an add-on that was called Firesheep. And just to get students sort of the idea of why it's important to have HTTPS, secure HTTP, everywhere, which is something that we're slowly moving towards over the last couple of years, especially with the Edward Snowden release. I think that was a big sort of motivating factor for a lot of people to switch over to securing all web traffic, not just the authentication. Okay, so his cookie attack doesn't work because it turns out the Erudite were smart and protected their website using secure HTTP. And so he's not able to steal Max's cookies from the network. But there's another way to try and steal cookies, and this way being described is known as cross-site scripting. And so the idea is that any of the websites that are out there, if you trick a user into visiting it, can deliver a piece of code called JavaScript for your browser to execute. And so if you're executing rogue JavaScript code, that code could actually try and send your cookie from the local machine to a website that the adversary controls. And so this is the impact that a cross-site scripting attack can have. And so there are many different styles of cross-site scripting attacks, and so in this diary entry, I try and go through the different kinds, and I talk about one that's known as a persistent cross-site scripting one, where someone uploads in, say, like a public forum or in a comment section in the news site, a thing that is basically JavaScript, that if you hit that page and you're not protected properly, your browser will execute that JavaScript, even though it's from a source that it doesn't trust. And so that's one of them. There's another one that we know Max has a penchant for clicking on links in email messages. There's another one that works by sending a bogus email address or a bogus link to a person, getting them to click on it, and the JavaScript is actually embedded in the link and gets reflected off of the site that the request goes to, and then executed directly on Max's computer. And so this kind of cross-site scripting attack is a reflected cross-site scripting one, or a non-persistent one. So if they search for a non-persistent cross-site scripting attack, they'll see that one of the versions is reflected. And so hopefully this is a reasonable overview of the attack that students can understand, to get them an idea of what cross-site scripting is in lay terms. Okay, in day 18, Ford realizes that the email message he sent to Max was clicked on and it still got blocked. And so a lot of web browsers have built-in protection against cross-site scripting attacks. So it appears that whoever set up Max's web browser was doing the right thing, blocking scripts, turning the cross-site scripting auditor on, these sorts of things. So that line of attack is broken. And so Ford decides that this is pretty futile. Attacking Max is not working. And so now Ford considers maybe he can actually attack the Erudite systems directly. And so he shifts his attention away from hacking Max and Max's Chromebook and browser to seeing if he can just penetrate the Erudite network itself. And this leads to the final segment of the diary, where he's basically trying to penetrate the Erudite systems. And so he thinks about what might be protecting the Erudite network from attack, and he describes the tools that the Erudite have installed on the Dauntless systems. And he talks about a tool that blocks all incoming connections to non-essential network servers and ports, and much like going from a full-fledged computer to something that runs Chrome and only a single browser reduces the attack surface of the software that's running on that system. The same idea happens in the networks, where you're reducing the number of services exposed to the outside world to reduce the attack surface against your network. And so he describes a system that came out of the late 1980s from researchers at AT&T that was one of the first implementations of this kind of technology. And of course, this is a firewall. So just introducing the idea of network traffic filtering using firewalls. Okay, and so in order to figure out what the erudite systems have exported on their network or exposed in their network, people who are trying to penetrate networks have automated tools for probing what's on the other side. And in this diary entry, Ford decides that he wants to use some automation to detect what's open. And he uncovers one such tool called Nmap, which is an industry standard tool to probe for open ports and services to detect what's running. And so it's mostly a network scanner that automatically probes. But what he wants is not only, so it automatically probes for what services are open, but what he actually wants is something that will tell him what is both open and vulnerable to attack. Because if you have a tool that does both of those at the same time, then you don't have to actually try and manually penetrate each open service. You can just try and figure out how to get into services that are known to be open and vulnerable. And so there's a tool that was released in 1998 that is quite tenable, and this is a pun because the company who now who released it is Tenable Security. And so when the students go and they Google this description, they'll find that the tool that that Ford is talking about is called Nessus, Nessus, which again is a well-known tool in the community, and the concept behind it is what this diary entry is trying to teach. So once you have something that's open and vulnerable, it would be nice to be able to instantly exploit that vulnerability. And well, if it's nice if you're an adversary. I mean, it's not so nice if you're trying to protect your network. But it would be nice to, since Ford is not necessarily a computer trained to do exploits. Well, we don't know that. He may be. But what you would like is a tool that would automatically exploit those vulnerabilities that Nessus has found in order to compromise the system automatically. And so there is a tool that does that. It's an open source penetration testing tool, an exploit development framework that's been developed. And the one that has advertised itself as having the largest exploit database in the world, and it still does, and it will for as long as probably people are developing it, is Metasploit. And this is an industry standard tool for launching known exploits against vulnerable services. And the hint, so not only is the entry here enough, I think, to reveal this tool, the hint, the key that unlocks this diary entry is Rapid7, and that's the company that maintains this tool. So when he runs these tools, he comes across an out-of-date version of a web form that's running on the Erudite network. And so, according to the tool, this version is exploitable, and it suffers from a common problem in many websites, a lack of input validation. So what I'm doing with this entry is trying to teach them the idea behind a certain kind of exploit, and it's one of the most prevalent ones, in which you take arbitrary input from an adversary potentially, and you use it in a way that's unsafe. And that tricks the server. Instead of using that data as being data that treated as data, it tricks the server into actually executing some of that data as code. And if it's code, then the adversary can run arbitrary commands on your server. And so in this case, it describes this vulnerability as being one that affects databases that contain usernames and passwords of everyone on the site. And such a vulnerability can often lead someone to get all the credentials of the users on this website. And another hint is that there was once a little boy named Bobby Tables whose mother taught everyone on XKCD how to perform and then this is the attack. And so this ties in with the puzzle that is solved to unlock this. So one of the parts of that puzzle is the actual comic strip, the XKCD comic strip. And so the answer to this one is SQL injection or SQL injection. And so by launching a SQL injection attack on day 22, Foer talks about how he is able to dump the username and password hashes from the forum site. So at least the forum was running, wasn't storing the passwords in the clear. And so he does have all the user names, and so he sees one that's called Jane Matthews, which is Janine Matthews. And so he tries to run a password cracker on her password hash. And so one of the things that adversaries will do is once they have your password hash, they'll try and run a dictionary attack. They'll send a dictionary through the hash function that was used to generate this password hash to try and find a match. And that's what Foer does. And he says hours later, but really, well, it depends on the hash function that's being used. It might not even take that long on a GPU system. So. And so nothing happened, nothing is returned, because if you are picking strong passwords or you're using a password manager, you can generate passwords that are not in any dictionary, in which case you would have to brute force all the combinations to break that password. And so none of his attacks work on Janine Matthews. But he does find a bunch of accounts for lower level erudite people who are using this forum that had passwords such as 1234556, QWERTY, and these are the top 10 passwords that people are using on websites, unfortunately. So I love you, password, let me in, and so these passwords abound everywhere in this forum, so he is then able to log in as the users and poke around, these particular users that use these passwords, and poke around on the forum to see all the messages that are on there. And he sees that the most recent messages are quite old, but as is often the case, when you have a beachhead on the network that you're trying to penetrate, so when adversaries get onto your network, even if it's a low-level, unprivileged machine, it's highly valuable to have that beachhead, because then what an adversary can do is, if they have a presence on that machine, they can use that to pivot onto a more valuable machine. And they can use that to, that unprivileged account, they can try and execute what's known as a privilege escalation attack to get more privileged sort of access to machines. And so that's the idea here. He has, Foer has a low-level account using these passwords that are obvious to guess. So he has an unprivileged account that he has, and so he can look around for exploits that allow him to take this unprivileged account and escalate his access to someone like Janine's access or the administrator access on this machine. And so this kind of description is going to lead students to do some research on this kind of attack, and hopefully that's what they get, privilege escalation, as the answer to this diary entry. So in entry 23, Foer talks about how he found a set UID program on the machine that was vulnerable. And so this is a common way to escalate your privileges on a system. If you have a vulnerable program that gets temporary administrator privileges to do a specific task, which is what a set UID program does. If that's vulnerable, you could actually, instead of getting temporary access for a specific task, you can get permanent access for any number of tasks on that machine. And so that's what the beginning of this entry is describing. And so now that he has administrator access on this forum, he's going to install a bunch of software on it to do what's known as laterally move inside of the network. Now, the network was protected by a firewall from external access, but as soon as Foer has a beachhead on the internal network, he has full reign to connect to any of the back-end systems, because this notion of what's inside and what's outside completely is broken if the adversary is on the inside. So now he has full access, but he has access on an unprivileged machine, and he wants to be able to pivot over to something that's more secure, like the server that Max is logging into on the back end there on the erudite network. And so what he does is that he takes that network scanner, and now he can, if he runs it on this forum server, a whole bunch of other machines should be opened up that that are basically on the other side of the firewall. And so that's what he does. And the intuition that he has is that probably all the most important stuff is now protected with HTTPS. If the administrator is doing the right thing. So then he uses his scanner to try and find everything that's running OpenSSL on a port. So OpenSSL is the industry standard cryptographic software library. And as it turns out, there are some famous bugs in OpenSSL that can be leveraged. And so it's really important to understand what version of SSL you have on your system and that it's actually up to date. Because you could get hit by a bug that will expose that you think because your site is protected by OpenSSL, you're secure, but because there's a bug in OpenSSL, it's actually not. And one of the most famous ones, which is the one that's described here from 2014, allows someone to steal the names and passwords of users. And this was Heartbleed, and so there's an XKCD strip on this that probably maybe we'll splice into this diary entry, but they should be able to find the Heartbleed vulnerability. Okay, we're finally at the end of this. So the forum server revealed Janine's username. And then in attacking the vulnerable server using the Heartbleed vulnerability, so the way that that exploit works is that you send a bunch of probes, and if you send a malformed probe, you can sort of peek into the memory of the login server on the back end. And so what you want to do is see if it can reveal the credentials of Janine Matthews. So say Janine Matthews is logged into this server and her credentials are somewhere stored in memory on the process that's running that system. Then as probes from the forum machine, For can sort of see if he can sort of dump the memory that's got Janine's credentials on it. And that's basically what's described in this diary entry. So the first paragraph talks about how he uses Heartbleed to get the login information for Janine, and then the second one, he logs in, he scans all of Janine's email, all of the files in her home directory, he sees the Serum D2, he sees the plans for it, they're about to launch it against the Abnegation clan, which follows the plot of Divergent, the first book. And then he also sees that there is the presence of a high security computer server in Janine's server room that is what's known as air-gapped, meaning that it's not connected to the network. And this is the machine that's being used to basically control these people under the influence of this serum. And so it can't be reached from the rest of the Erudite computers. You have to basically go into Janine's machine room directly to get access to it. But that's where the mother load is. And so it's an air-gap system, and he needs to figure out a way to infiltrate Erudite headquarters in order to obtain, and what this is physical access. So if you have an air-gap machine, probably the only way you can get at it is through physical access, whether it is going up to that machine yourself, or tricking someone into bringing something that they can physically inject into the machine, like what they believe Stuxnet was delivered via. And so that's the final clue. And so this sort of wraps up the plot in that at this point the campers know that the reason why For disappeared is to go and try and break into the Erudite headquarters and into the control room that houses this computer. And so this is the setup for then the urban race, where For will desperately contact the campers because he's outside of the control room and he's needing help to decode messages and to do other things in order to break into the control room, to take down the computers, to stop the plot to destroy the city and Abnegation. So that is all for the diary entries. I will sign off.